Okay, so today the new thing is rational root theorem. If I were you, I'd just write down this abbreviation, RRT, the rational root theorem. And it will tell you what the roots are. What are the roots? The zeros. The thing that you could put in synthetic. You know, like if you did synthetic and I told you that the root was like 2, if I said that, then you'd go like this, and you'd go 3, 1, 6, 2, and you draw the line. We just learned that yesterday. We will practice that more in a minute. But how do I know what this number is? I mean, I've always been picking it. I'll tell you how I can tell what that number is. All right. So please write this down. You're never going to just remember it. You'll remember only 1/10 of what I tell you. That means you'll forget 90% of what I tell you. So write this down. Now, what you practice, you'll remember better than that. But in a second, this is going to be off the screen, and you'll have forgotten. F con over F co. What in the heck does that mean? It means you're going to take the factors of the constant and divide it by the factors of the coefficient. Which coefficient, Mr. Server? Because there's actually 4 of them. The 3, the 1, the 6, or the 2. Some people are going, there's no 1 up there. Well, there would be a 1 if I drew it in, right? So 3, the 1, the 6, and the 2. Which of those is the coefficient that really matters? The lead one, the 3. Which one is the constant? There's only one of those. 2 is the constant. So if you were taking notes and you didn't already know that, like if you knew that, fine, don't write it down. But if you were like, I don't know what a constant is, then write that down. All right, and that one is the lead coefficient. C-O-E, don't have to spell it, it's okay. The lead co. All right, so what are the factors of the constant? Because then I'm going to divide them by the factors of the coefficient. Well, what is the constant? 2. What are the factors of the constant? What can you make a 2 with? 2 and a 1. I'm going to list them in order. They're going to ask you to do the same. They're going to ask you to list them in order from small to big. Because this homework tonight is a Schoology quiz, and since you can have a list of like 6 things, it says put them in order from small to big. All right, so 1 and 2 are the factors of the constant. We're going to divide that by, what are the factors of the coefficient? That guy. What are its factors? 1 and 3. Now, how do you divide 1 and 2 by 1 and 3? You just do it one thing at a time. So I'm going to also put in this before I forget. Plus and minus of all that. That means I need to get a positive and a negative of all my answers. So let's just take it one at a time. If I had this 1 and I divide it by 1, I would get 1. And I'm going to remember my plus and minus, so I'm going to put it there ahead of time. Then I'm going to take the 1 and divide it by the other factor down there, which is a 3, and that's a 1/3. Am I listing them in order from small to big anymore? Nope. I got to change that order later, but then I take my 2 and I divide it by 1, and I get 2. And then I take the 2 divided by the 3, and I get 2/3. Plus and minus of 1, plus and minus of 1/3, plus and minus of 2, and plus and minus of 2/3. So now I'm going to go list them in order. Plus and minus of 1 and, no, 1/3 first, sorry. And then 2/3. And 1 and 2. There. Now they're in order from smallest to biggest, and that's what you have to do on tonight's homework. Good question. You have to make all of them as positives and all of them as negatives. And you have to list them in order from smallest to biggest. Whew! Pain in the butt. -2, comma, -1, comma, -2/3, comma, -1/3, comma, 1/3, comma, 2/3, comma, 1, comma, 2. Are you serious? Yeah, I am. But this is the last day of new material, so last thing you have to learn before you test. So that's good. We are going to make sure you are good at this stuff before we test. Right now, I'm leaning towards having 2 review days, tomorrow and then Monday, and then taking the test Tuesday. Number 1, this is not easy stuff. Number 2, we have extra days. We don't need to, like, before the end of the semester, we only have 1 more chapter to cover. So we're a little ahead of last year, so we have the time. Number 3, it should prevent having some retakes. Some kids will get good grades on it in the first place if I just delay 1 more day, give you an extra chance to practice. Okay, so that's what I'm leaning towards is 2 days of review, tomorrow and Monday, and the test Tuesday. All right, but we'll see how it all shakes out. That's what I'm leaning towards right now. All right, so which of these actually is the root? Now that, I hate to even admit, we used to make people test all of them with synthetic until they found the right answer. And that was kind of painful. But I will give myself credit for this. I was the one who pushed the team to let them use their calculator to find which of the possible roots actually is the root. How do you think you can use your calculator to do it? Hint, think about graphing. Yes? And let's say I graph it, and let's say it looks like this. What are you going to do with it? What's the important spot? Yes, the roots, the x-intercepts. I heard some people say roots, some people say x-intercepts. If you can see that, oh, look, it hits at positive 2 right there. And it hits at negative 2 right there. Do you get I know the roots just from looking at the graph? Instead of having to test everything with synthetic. Now there's one downside to this, and that is, does your calculator actually factor this? No. It does tell you, though, which of them will work, and then you can use synthetic on it. All right. I will be your calculator. Imagine for a moment you just graphed this. I will tell you that... Actually, I'm just going to use the calculator. All right, I'm going to pause for a second while we graph this thing and see where it touches. Pausing. Okay, so that's what mine looks like. Oh, wait, I have a second line on mine. My bad. I have a y equals 5 line there. We do not need that, that's for sure. So, did you guys notice that it crossed at a negative number? You get instantly, we can rule out half of our answers that were the positive ones. And then, do you notice that it's a fraction? It's less than 1. Then, well, sadly, it's hard to tell then if it's negative 2/3 or negative 1/3. Now, I'm going to zoom in. You guys know how to zoom in? I hit zoom, and I go down to in, and I hit enter, but it doesn't actually zoom. I always thought, like, dang, it didn't seem to change much. It hasn't zoomed yet. It's waiting for you to tell it where to zoom in. I'm going to say that's kind of what I want to see better, so I'm going to say zoom in there, and it will. And do you think that's negative 1/3 or negative 2/3? Negative 1/3. Now I'll show you how to actually use synthetic now that we know which one it is. But do you get that's nice? You didn't have to check 8 things. Yes? Yes, there's more than one way to find where that is. You can do second calculate intersect if you do the line y equals 0. I like that way. There's another way called second calculate 0, and that'll go, you go to the left of it, go to the right of it. That'll work too. But also the last option is just hitting trace. Man, loudest humans on the planet out there. If I just hit the trace button, and then I get close, do you get, I could estimate that that decimal is about negative 1/3. So the trace button works too. So I like all those options, but you can use the calculator on the test. So you'll be able to tell, but don't think this way then. I know some kids are like, oh, sweet, so I don't need that FCon over FCO thing. No, you're going to have to tell what the list of possible roots is from the FCon over the FCO. Factors the constant, factors the coefficient. Then this will tell you which one actually works. Then you'll also need a third thing, which is synthetic. So now let's do synthetic and see how 1/3 is going to work, negative 1/3, sorry, with this. 3 and 1 and 6 and 2. And quick side check, did this thing have any missing terms? Because if it did, I'd have to put a 0 in to hold the place. No, there was nothing missing because it went from 3 to 2 to 1 to there was no x, and that was good. So I'm dropping it like it was hot and then multiplying. And see, it's going to work out perfect because it's got a 1/3. It's multiplying by things that happen to work nice. 3 times negative 1/3 is negative 1. Add them, 0. Multiplying by 0 is always easy. Add them. Multiplying by 6 should be pretty easy. What's 6 divided by 3? So it's negative 2, and then the answer is 0. Cool! It's no remainder. So it worked. And but some of you might be thinking, but we already knew it was going to work. But the point is, now I know what the factors are, because I can translate that to x plus 1/3. Ooh, I almost said minus by accident. You always use the opposite sign. And then this I'm going to translate to 3x squared plus 6. Yes? Good question. So imagine for a second, here's the question. You pop the graph in, and it's got two roots, negative 1 and positive 2. Well, then you could only do one thing at a time, but you'd do synthetic on one of the roots and get an answer, and then you could do synthetic again on the smaller part. All right, I'm going to show you one just like that, where you're going to get two roots, and you could factor them out separately. All right, I'm going to pause for a second while I pull up that problem. All right, x to the fourth plus 3x to the third plus 4x squared plus 12x plus 8. And the first thing you should see is the prime directive. Is there anything that's in everything, like a 2 or an x that I can factor out? Watch for that, because on the test, that's just a killer. If you don't notice that you could have factored a 2x out, then the problem is going to have these nasty numbers. And if you would have just factored something out first, it's so much easier. But this one doesn't have any GCF. Can't factor it that way. Can I factor by grouping? Should be your second question. Can we group this right down the middle? No, it's an odd number of terms, Mr. Server. That won't work. There may be a complicated way to do that, but I'm not going to try to show you that. All right, then third option is, well, then I guess I should figure out what the possible roots are. That, again, is a separate category of test question. What are the possible roots? I just taught you how to do it. FCON over FCO. I'm going to pause for a second and see if you can figure out what are the possible roots of this one. Okay, so how do you do it? What are the factors of that? Excellent. And then the factor of the coefficient was just 1. So then, what have you forgot so far, but we need to put in? Anybody else see what he forgot? Plus minus. So easy to forget. I know. You might even have it on your paper, but you didn't tell me. Now, we're going to divide everything by 1. Ooh, that's really hard. Right? But when you list these in order from small to big, do you get this mistake by people? They go negative 1, negative 2, negative 4, negative 8, positive 1, positive 2, positive 4, positive 8, and Schoology marks you wrong. Why? That's not in order from small to big. What's the smallest one, really? Negative 8. See what I'm saying? Now, I'm willing to admit that this used to be abusive last year and the previous years, when we would say, now you have to test all of these with synthetic until you finally find the one that works. But we have technology. And so I think I try to be a balance of some things you need to know without technology and some things you just realistically use it. Nobody in the real world would test all of these. They'd go like, where's my calculator? Okay, so grab your calculator, type it in, hit graph, and see where it crosses. Now, spoiler alert, this is going to cross in 2 spots. We'll do one of them, we'll do synthetic with that, and then that will factor it a little ways, and then we'll factor it again with the other one. So it's really handy to not have to test 8 different things with, what's it called, with synthetic. It's much easier to use your graphing calculator. All right, so basically, you graph it, and then if I remember correctly, let me look back at what we wrote down in the first place. Doesn't it touch at -1 and at -2? Pretty sure it does. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, the kids helped me find a mistake in the problem. This should have been a 6 right here. And so now change your equation. We're not going to have to change the FCon over FCO. Yay, all those answers were still right because they didn't depend on the middle, right? But when we graphed this, this should have been a 6. And then it'll hit perfectly at 2 things. And I think this is where it would hit at -1 and -2. Okay. So it hits here at -2 and it hits here at -1. So those are my 2 things I should now know work. What do I do with that? Synthetic. So let me show you how to do synthetic again. We just learned it yesterday, so you're pretty new at it. If I use -2, I'm going to go 1, 3, 6, 12, 8. One times -2. Remember, you multiply this way. You add this way. You multiply this way. You add that way. Keep going. Anybody verify that it worked? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Tiff, what does it mean that it worked? Excellent. It was for sure a root. Would you tell me what the factors are then? I'll get it started. X plus 2 for that one. You know, we always use the opposite of this one here.
Oh, are you talking?
Yes, I am. And then, what's the other part? Can you do the other part?
Yeah, X to the third is plus X squared.
Yep, you said it right. I just wrote it wrong. Plus 4x plus 4. There you go. Now, some smart kids right now are going, but you only used one of the 2 spots you could have used. So now, let's use the other spot. What do you mean? We're going to try to factor x plus 2? No. We're going to try to factor that beast. Okay. What's the other thing that worked? -1. So we put it in a little I don't know. You wall it off like that, and then you go 1, 1, 4, 4. Draw the line, drop it like a tot. 1 times -1 is -1. Add them, multiply them, add them, multiply them. If it ends with 0, the odds of that just happening by accident are so slim. It usually means you did it right. Yay, it factored. Alex, can you tell me what this interprets to? What does this interpret to? Just tell me the answer. Yes, fact. This is what I mean when I say interpret, I mean what are the factors then? I know it worked because there's a 0, but what are the factors? Yep. This is. Oh, you're bringing down the x plus 2 from up here. I bet a lot of people forgot that. And then keep going. Close. So close. Yup. Why? Because there's a 0 right there. That's how many x's. That's how many x squareds. And then if you can get this far, you should be proud of yourselves. Honestly, that's pretty amazing. You factored something Look at how complicated that was. It's got 5 terms. It's got an x to the 4th in it. But if you could go just a little bit further, you'd get the straight A. Be like those cool kids who can factor this. I'll have to play that song later. Wish that I could be like the cool kids. Okay, anyway. Do you know how to do this kind of cool kid factoring? Good, tell me what it is. Alright. I think you're going to feel silly in a second. Think about it a little further. What's root 4? You and like 100 other kids wrote that on their Schoology quiz today. Square root of 4 is just 2. Okay? But seriously, a ton of kids are so used to just taking the square root of that and they just don't think about how that, that actually works. The square root of 4, 2. So we got I, 2, or 2I, and then this one's 2I also. But Mr. Server, I thought there was always square roots there. Well, when the square root works out nice, then it turns out to just be a number. Could I write 2I? Absolutely. Would I accept I2? Yes, I would. Okay, there's 4 roots. Were there supposed to be 4 roots? Yeah, look at the original problem. It's got a power of 4. That means 4th degree. And it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms, so we couldn't do factor by grouping. 4th degree polynomial has 1, 2, 3, 4 roots. And listen to this carefully. All of them are imaginary. True or false? False. Half of them are imaginary. True or false? True. All of them touch the x-axis. False. How many of them touch the x-axis? 2 of them. So 2 of these are x-intercepts. 2 are not. These are real, so they are x-intercepts. These are imaginaries, so they are not x-intercepts. And when they ask you to list the imaginary roots, you would say plus and minus 2I. When they ask you to list the real roots, you'd say 2, no, close, negative 2 and negative 1. We knew those all the way a long time ago once we graphed it. We knew those were roots. Remember? When you looked at the graph right away, you could see there was 2 things. These took a little more time to find and more factoring. Okay. Now, that right there, see, you had to do it was like Inception. We had to do the rational root theorem to figure out what are the possible roots, and we found out that this was one of the possible roots. And when we got all done, then we had to do another one inside of that. We had to do another synthetic on this part. This part had to have another synthetic done on it until we finally got done. And how did we even know to stop? We didn't even stop. When we got to here, we factored it again. So it's just all about a giant factoring festival. You just factor, 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 factor until you can't factor it anymore. That's as hard as it gets. So that means, in theory, we could test tomorrow. You know, there's some people that actually believe in the math department of not having review days. Just like, okay, kids, touch everything, test us tomorrow. It's like, I can't even imagine trying to not have a review day, just go directly to the test. And basically, in my opinion, usually it's about the teacher is frustrated because if they have a review day, some of the kids just fart around because they'll say, here's a bunch of problems, you should work on them, and some kids just don't want to work, and so they'll just screw around on the work day. So then their idea is, well, I'll just eliminate that screw around day then, and I'll just have the test right away, and it'll save time. But then that's like letting the class be dictated by the kids that don't care, and that's not the best way to go. You guys have been using your review days very well, so we'll keep on doing them. And I make you work during that review day too. I make you do problems with me. It's not just like a whole free hour of do work time. Okay, you'll have more time than usual on those days. So tomorrow, review day. Actually, probably 2 review days. Probably I also have a review day Monday. But if I decide tomorrow, after talking to my other teammates, that everybody's testing Monday, then I guess we'll test Monday. But if I'm hearing from a lot of people that, yeah, we're taking 2 review days, then I will too. Okay? I don't want you to get behind, but I also think we can probably We could probably test Monday, but I'm leaning towards Tuesday. All right. So let's actually start the homework together. It's a Schoology quiz. It's break it to you, but it's not that bad. The only thing that kind of stinks about them is how to enter the answers. So I will help you get the first one in completely so you understand how that works. Would you, ma'am, once you pull that Schoology quiz up, would you tell me what the first problem is? And I'll pause for a second while we find that first question on the Schoology quiz for today. All right. So the first problem is nasty. Does anybody even see the snake lying in the grass? It's about to grab your ankle. Yes? There's no regular x, so therefore there's a missing term. And therefore, if you just jumped right into doing, synthetic with this, you get it wrong every single time, and you wouldn't know why. Because there's a missing term, right? So what should I do different? It does have a 1 here. It does have a -3 for that. It does have a 1 here. It does have a 2 there. But then what? There's no x's. So you got to say plus x to the 0. Or no. 0x to the 1. My bad. So there's no x to the 1. So you put a 0 here and then a 3. So this 3 moves over and is last. And you had to have that missing term. Now, I just went and stuck a 2 here. Is that for sure the thing you're going to use to do synthetic? No, that's the whole point. How do you find out what number this is? With the rational, can anybody finish that? Root theorem, RRT. So let's do it on this problem. If you haven't forgotten already, it's the F con over what? F co. That was the only new thing for today. Factors of the constant over factors of the coefficient. So, help me do this one. Choo-choo, choo-choo. Factors of the constant. Plus and minus 1 and 3. That's the constant. How about the coefficient? Vega. So is dividing by 1 really going to even do anything? No. So it's pretty much this. So some kids type in -1, -3, 1, and 3. And I feel sad for them, but it will mark that wrong, and it should, because it's not in order from smallest to biggest. What should be first? G? Homie? G? Yes, the -3 should be first. There we go. -3, -1, 1, and 3. Okay. And ZP. Read me problem 2. Do you want to test them all with synthetic? I personally wouldn't. Because there's 4 of them. What could you do to find out which one works? Hint, use a piece of technology on your desk. Graph it. Once you graph it, you'll see which one touches. And it's not 2. I guarantee it, because it's not on the list. This is the list of possible things. Now, if I end up coming up with one that's on the positive side of the, of 0, then obviously I'll know it's either 1 or 3. And I'll have to zoom in a little closer maybe to figure out if it's 1 or 3. Or -1 or -3. It's a good question. When you're using the graphing calculator, putting in a 0x doesn't really do anything. It wouldn't hurt, but it wouldn't help. Can somebody who's got it graphed show it to me so I can I see, is yours graphed? Awesome. Thank you. At first, I had to kind of look really close. But if I had to, you could zoom in that area and try to figure out what that was? Otherwise, if you just hit trace and get really close, you'll know. Because you know I have a list. You know which one it's closest to. So her calculator actually said negative 0.8 because she was using trace to get close. Is it really negative 0.8? No, we just know that that must mean negative 1 because that's on our list, the closest thing. So, did you guys get the answer was negative 1? Okay. All right. Keep working. If you get stuck, ask for help, and I'll be happy to help you. Tomorrow we do a big review, and that's all I have for you for today.